Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Tuesday, the 4th of April. We've got a full squad this morning. It's unbelievable. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined firstly by Jonny McFarlane. How are we doing, Jonny?
Great to be on with the main men and looking forward to talking Rangers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joshua Barrie joins us for the second day in a row. How's it going, Joshua?
Yeah, echo that. It feels like it's been a while since it's been all three of us, Derek. So, yeah, good to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we talk all things Rangers, folks, you know the drill by now. First of all, a quick word for our sponsors, Seneca Hair Restoration, the #1 hair transplant group in Europe. If you're looking to restore some lost self-confidence, perhaps, if you're eager for a Dick Advocate or a Chris Boyd, then these are the guys to go to, the #1 hair transplant group in the land. And as ever, I've put their website link and their social media accounts links in the description box. If you want to subscribe to the website, we've got an offer on just now, just £2 for 2 months worth of content. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details, and you won't be disappointed. There's a lot of great stuff on there, including an interview that you did, Joshua, with Neil Banfield that subscribers can enjoy this morning. How was that? What can people expect when they read that piece this morning on the website?
Yeah, I've stuck it in the comment section and the description as well, Derek. It was really interesting and real pleasure to sit down with someone like Neil Banfield, who obviously spent 21 years at Arsenal, kind of heading up the elite youth development, then became Wenger's kind of right-hand man within the first team squad, worked with some unbelievable names, but also has this fascinating backstory with Michael Beale, who he first came across when he scouted him as a 12 or 13-year-old working for Charlton. And it kind of just charts his journey and Beale's journey as a coach to working together at QPR and then Rangers. Banfield also did some consultancy work as a scout for Gerrard, was quite important in bringing Aribo to the club. But it's kind of just a bit of a look at his life in football. He had a triple bypass as well in 2018. So after leaving Arsenal, a really difficult year, and now is in a position where, as he kind of says himself in the article, he wouldn't have foreseen. So genuinely a really humble guy, really good to kind of speak football with him, because obviously it's just the names he's worked with, Ozil, Wilshere, Cazorla, Gnabry, to name a few, does kind of takes your attention when you're speaking to him. So part one today, kind of a whole chronological look at his career working at Rangers, what Beale's like, what makes his training so good. And then part two tomorrow will be a little bit more about working with Wenger and just some of the names that he worked with during those 21 years at Arsenal. So I hope people enjoy, and you can read it. It's in the description on all the kind of social links as well, if you want to go and have a read of that.
Yeah, he's an experienced. I know Michael Beale touched on this when he was unveiled. Jonny talked about his backroom staff, and you like to have that. I think he says the grey hair in there just to keep him set on the straight and narrow, if you like. And he's clearly a man of a great wealth of experience and a good sounding board for Michael Beale. And by all accounts, results on the park suggest that him and the backroom staff are doing a cracking job so far.
I mean, that's it, Derek. The results so far have been terrific under Michael Beale. There's absolutely no doubt about that. You know, if he'd been in place from the start of this season, I don't think this term would be panning out the way it is right now. And there's hard evidence for that, because we've got 30 games now, 15 games for Gio, 15 games for Michael Beale. I think the evidence is stark that there's been an enormous improvement under Michael Beale in terms of dealing with the bread and butter Scottish Premiership sides. I don't have the figures right in front of me. I'm hoping Joshua, while I'm talking, can eagerly pull those up. But I saw a few threads on various platforms this morning talking about the kind of detail and the data under Beale. But we know that he's lost that very difficult game against Celtic in the League Cup final. But let's put that to one side. I know it's difficult, but it's a League Cup game, and things can go wrong in a single one-off cup game. We've seen that over the years to even the best Rangers managers. Let's just focus on the league, which is the bread and butter and the most important tournament the Rangers play in. He's won every game apart from one, which he drew, and he drew that game on the back of a very, very, very late Celtic goal at Ibrox. So to go through that period of games without basically losing any points at all to anyone but Celtic, I think shows that this is a guy that understands Scottish football, understands what's required of Rangers, and the level of turnaround that he's engendered in that team to make them into a squad that's capable of churning out that kind of level of result over and over and over again, I think is really, really important. There's been one game in the whole of Michael Beale's reign where you thought Rangers are in trouble, and that was against Aberdeen at Pittodrie. They still pulled it back.
Yeah.
We know how that game went and how incredible it was with Scott Arfield coming on and turning it around. But the rest of the time, even when they've been going a goal down, you just felt they'll get there in the end. And that's what he's built there, I think. It's a real winning mentality in those games. The big test now, go and do it against Celtic. He needs a big one. He needs a Steven Gerrard at Parkhead circa 2019 January, or late, maybe it was December 2018. Can't remember now. That's what he needs.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's had a great start. And I was seeing a stat recently, Joshua, the difference that this season just between Gio and Michael Beale, and you do wonder if Michael Beale was in charge at the start of the season, if things might have been a tad closer in terms of the title race. Although obviously the caveat is Van Bronckhorst had to contend with a raft of injuries that decimated the squad. Michael Beale has been fortunate to an extent that the players have come back, but the difference has been quite stark, hasn't it? And since Michael Beale has come into, not just that, just that there just seems to be a feeling amongst the fan base that even if Rangers do go behind now, they will get back and recover the situation.
Yeah, I think it's most obvious away from home, because at home, I think it will still probably take a bit of a pre-season to really get Rangers looking like Beale wants. Again, was reflecting on this after the Banfield interview. The fact that, as Johnny says, the start's been near perfect. When you lose an Old Firm Cup final, pardon me, I think the only thing that makes losing an Old Firm better is by winning one. Totally agree that I think Beale needs a big result in an Old Firm, like any Rangers manager does. The biggest change for me has been away from home, Derek. I do think, as we spoke about yesterday, you saw with both of those goals against Dundee United some themes of what Rangers have obviously been working on to try and break through the block with those kind of third-man runs, getting Tillman in high positions, getting the attackers playing close together, even though Dundee United were defending narrow. But away from home, I think it's 8 wins away from home in a row. Gerrard's highest, I think, was 8 or 9 in the title-winning season. But it's just not been a foregone conclusion that this Rangers squad go away and win so seamlessly away from home. Now, I know Fir Park, for example, they've had a good record, but if you compare the two Hibs games at Easter Road this season, I know Rangers probably win that game if they don't have 2 men sent off on that day earlier in the season. But I think the product on show is so different. And I think Beale's, what he's trying to do is better suited for domestic football than Gio. And I think you can see away from home, he doesn't compromise as well. He doesn't bring in an extra kind of defensive player to the midfield and try and win the battle and then get what he can. I think you see teams at home, when Rangers come and play against them, they have to come out a little bit more. They have to maybe push their fullbacks up, and that leaves space to exploit in return. Beale, I remember one of the kind of coaches' webinars that I went to about a year ago, and he spoke about this being a game of cat and mouse. If opponents are going to attack a little bit more, okay, yes, that gives Rangers more to worry about, or whatever team he's managing. But in return, it's always about what you can do to hurt the opposition, always defending with a view of how you want to attack. So I think that's really come to the fore away from home. You've seen the benefit of that. But I agree with Johnny. You can win as many games as you want, I think, at Rangers, but if you don't go and win Old Firm games, then it kind of doesn't matter. This game, but also the game at hand, and so much pressure on that. I think there'll be pressure on his team selection naturally after the last game. You just got to cross your fingers that Nico Raskin's back, fit and available, and obviously we'll see again, as discussed yesterday, Derek, what he does with that front three.
Yeah, let's get to a few of the comments that are coming in. First of all, Maka says, morning guys, enjoyed reading part 1 of the Neil Banfield interview with my cuppa. Do you think the team selected on Saturday are mentally tough enough to play in the hostile atmosphere? Concerned about a couple. Are you concerned about a couple of the players going into that atmosphere on Saturday? Johnny, of course, no Rangers fans will be present. Which is very unfortunate indeed for the final 2 Old Firm games this season in the league. But is there question marks around some that need to stand up and deliver going to Parkhead, where we, of course, saw that heavy defeat earlier on in the season?
Okay, take Cantwell, Tillman, out of it. Raskin, we don't know if he's going to play or not. But take the kind of newer players out of it, who are key parts, and you look at the other players. Well, they've won at Parkhead before, so I've got no concerns about them in terms of the atmosphere. Todd Cantwell has been a bit of a darling of the Rangers support. He's done really, really well, but you'll need to carry that into this game, because fundamentally, as a Rangers player, you're going to be judged on how well you do against Celtic. Sorry, guys. That's just life. It's that simple.
So you're judged,
that's going to be where you cast your name into legend. And it's a big ask, expecting him to go into that game and make a huge difference, etc., because it's his first. He'll be a little bit taken aback by the atmosphere, I would imagine. But overall, I don't really have fears about that. Where I do have fears about Rangers is tactically against this Celtic team, because we've seen at Parkhead Rangers teams getting like a really, really bad start, looking like deer caught in headlights, and getting smashed within 40 minutes and the game being over. That can't happen again. If it does, there's going to be a major inquest. Rangers have to be tight. They have to be solid. They have to cause a threat. They can't allow Celtic to swarm all over them. I think Michael Beale has to be really bold in this one, Derek. I don't know what Josh's thoughts are, but I want to see a Rangers team that is suffocating the life out of Celtic at the top of the pitch. I want to see them going long, giving Celtic the ball, and then trying to take the ball back off them with the high press. Celtic play through them, they play through them. I want to see an aggressive, bombastic, argumentative, in-your-face, bordering on the red card Rangers. This is how you have to play against Celtic. We've seen that before with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst in the semi-final, where Celtic looked pretty good for the opening part of the game, as they always do, but they tire because they put so much energy in. Rangers are going to have to go at them from the get-go, like they did in that cup final. And you remember that cup semi-final, and you remember by the end of it, Celtic were out on their feet, and Rangers were running over the top of them. The famous run by Calvin Bassey, given the amount of 120 minutes he'd played over the weeks preceding that, he was still by far had the power to emerge through Celtic in the way he did. That's what they need again. Can they do it? It's a big ask. It's a big ask, because Celtic are very, very strong at Parkhead. But Michael Beale needs to find a tactical way, and that would be what I would like to see.
Yeah, James Perry here saying they need to start on the front foot, go from the start. Sort of echoes what Brian Laudrup has been saying as well in his weekly column. He says Rangers showed Celtic too much respect the last time the sides met in that League Cup final defeat. He says, he's wrote in his Daily Mail column, Celtic have history in their sights with Ange Postecoglou targeting a flawless end to the season. Parkhead club are pushing for a record Premiership points total as part of their bid to win a treble. The question is then whether Rangers can trip them up on Saturday. I believe they can, but Michael Beale needs to strike a perfect balance between bravery and discipline when he takes charge of his third Old Firm game. That's it, Joshua, isn't it? Johnny says there it's sort of that playing on the line of potential red cards. I worry about that with Alfredo Morelos, who is likely to get the nod up front.
I wouldn't give him that information. I would just say, go play your normal game, Alfredo.
Are you concerned about one or two heading into this game, Joshua? I've got to say, like Johnny, I'm really hoping that Raskin's fit, as we all are. Cantwell was a certain starter. Tillman, for me, there has been a few question marks whether he's capable of doing it in the big games. And they don't come much bigger than this. I think he's. We all know he can do the business against the rest of the division, but I think there's possibly a few question marks on whether he can do it against Celtic. Is there any others that you're that you're looking for a performance out of?
I think, to go back to Johnny's point, naturally when the last two games there at Parkhead for Rangers have ended 3-0 and 4-0, there's going to be a bit of hesitancy about a couple of players. The approach is totally different, and I think Gio's approach, especially when it's sat off and it's sat back, it could be pulled apart more because it was that kind of hybrid man marking system. And Celtic, I think one of their main strengths is when they get a team, they break them down with those rotations, and you've seen that for kind of both the goals in the semi-final. I don't think you can allow them to control the game in that way. So it's how you go about preventing that. Do you go, as Johnny says, right high from goal kicks and try and close off all their passing options and be aggressive. In the game at Ibrox in the first half, the start of the year, at the January Old Firm, Celtic, I think, had a lot of the ball in the first 30 minutes without creating too much. There was a few crosses across the face of goal. I thought at the game at the time that they were really running over Rangers, but I think watching it back, Rangers to a degree were relatively comfortable without playing too well. I know they went behind with that stupid goal. I think you do need freshness, pardon me, though, because there just comes a time where if you start the same team that's lost those 2 games there, and obviously a similar team to the one that lost the Cup final, you've got to remember what the conversation was after that Cup final, regardless of kind of individual merits. These players, Cantwell and Raskin and more in the summer, will be brought in because there needs to be refreshment to the starting 11. I think you've seen how Cantwell's done that, and Raskin, I know he's played a little bit less. If they're both fit, I think you have to play them. It looks like Borna Barisic will play because Ridvan Yilmaz didn't at the weekend, Derek, which I think is a bold decision, even though it'll be bold as well to throw Ridvan in. But especially if you look at Barisic's last 2 games at Parkhead, I think he has a bit of a point to prove in there. The big thing for me is the midfield. I think that's where Rangers have looked so... they've trailed Celtic so heavily in these games, going back to the 2 games at Parkhead, but also that Cup final as well. If Raskin and Cantwell are in there, I think that's an ambitious selection, but I think it's the correct one. I definitely have Raskin, Jack, and Cantwell in there if they're all fit and available. You know, as we discussed yesterday, Raskin meant to be back in training this week, so I think everyone will be crossing their fingers until the press conference on Friday to find out if that's true.
Yeah, Rangers Review writer Graham Hanna gets in touch. Morning, Graham. He says, good morning, gents. What impact would a loss at Parkhead have on the upcoming Scottish Cup semi-final for Beale? Does this alter his thinking for Saturday? An interesting one for me. Well, the Scottish Cup semi-final is, if you had to rank the games, Johnny, is the bigger of the trio of Old Firm matches coming up. Of course, is the point Graham raises, is that a point that alters Michael Beale's thinking, perhaps? I just think he just puts in his strongest team and he has to go for it, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, he can take learnings from the league game. Let's be honest, the more important one is the semi-final. That's the one that Michael Beale literally has to win.
Yep.
This league one is at Parkhead. Doesn't matter if you're Watersmith, Graham Souness, Michael Beale. It's always been really, really difficult to win at Parkhead. We know that. So what he needs to do, though, is he needs to show that this Rangers team is on the pathway to tipping the balance, tipping the scales in this fixture. Because since Ange Postecoglou's came in, really, Celtic have had the upper hand, whether it be even that first game at Ibrox when Beale was in the dugout. Steven Gerrard was obviously struck down with COVID and wasn't there. But I think Celtic were pretty unlucky that day. Anyone who was an observer that wasn't perhaps watching through blue-tinted spectacles would say that, 1-0 probably flattered Rangers in that game. Tactically, I thought they were very rigid and pretty good, Rangers, but Celtic had a lot of chances. You remember Kyogo forcing Robbie McCrory, who was excellent that day, to make a number of saves. And since then, guys, we all know what's happened. The Scottish Cup semi-final is the one beacon of light where I think Rangers played really, really well. They went to Parkhead and got the 1-1 draw. Fashion Sakalo hit the post not long after that, which was another very good performance. Rangers did what they need to do against Celtic, which is weather that early storm, because Celtic are so aggressive and harry so much and are so in your face that they always tire. So if you can get them to a situation whereby you're looking at the second half and you're still in the game, I think you have a chance against Celtic. But you have to take your chances. You have to be a team that's going to have the fitness to not only match Celtic in that first period, but push past them in the second. And I think there's going to be a lot of answers to questions many of us have about this squad and about these players. It's all very well doing it against Dundee United, against St Mirren, against Aberdeen. Well done to the players for doing that. But this is where you are marked. This is where history will judge you as a Rangers player. So we will see where we're at in this game. And I listen, I don't want to be negative, but I have my concerns about the way this game is going to go, based on what we've seen at Parkhead in the last couple of games. It's essentially the same team. I don't think Nico Raskin's going to be fit. He might play, but is he going to be fit? You know, Michael Beale said that he'd be back in training yesterday, so hopefully that's the case. But he's now had a little period out, and sometimes that can take the sharpness away from you. I would feel a lot better about it if it was going into that game with a midfield that had continued to gel, Cantwell, Raskin, Jack together. I think that's what they'll go with, but you'll ask whether or not, you know, that there's a sharpness level required for this kind of game. I'm interested in how Rangers are going to approach this in the front three.
Yeah.
Because Sakala's caused Celtic all kinds of problems with his pace. And if he's on it, he can really, really cause problems, because we know those Celtic fullbacks are coming inside, joining the midfield to give them overloads in there, which leaves massive amount of spaces down the sides. So if he's going to play, because you need that pace on either side, Kent the same, where's Tillman going to be? Is Tillman going to make this team? Or are they going to play Jack, Cantwell and Tillman as a midfield three?
No.
I don't think tracking back and doing the hard yards is Malik Tillman's game.
No.
Based on what I've seen. I know John Lundstrom had a bit of a pop in the media conference to the newspapers the other day. It was actually my question that he answered that he was referring to. And I'll be the first to admit, you know, I didn't fully grasp, I think, Malik Tillman's qualities going forward under Gio, because while I was acknowledged, obviously, he was a talented player, I felt like the Champions League exposed that side of his game, that second side that you do need. You do need in Old Firm games, and you do need in European games. But he has improved in that regard. Whether or not he's improved enough for my liking to go to Parkhead, I'm not sure. At the same time, you've got people that will be whispering in your ear saying you really want to leave one of your top three players in terms of their overall quality out in the biggest of all games. I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he's going to approach it. Could we see, Joshua, I'm asking you, Kent on the left, Sakala on the right, Tillman false nine?
Well, I think that Celtic have used their fullbacks a little bit differently against Beale's Rangers, because they're, you know, if Rangers only commit their front three to the press, they don't go man for man in the same way that Gio's team did. Then see, especially the game at Ibrox, tried to keep them wider in the build-up just to stretch that out. Tillman, I think in midfield, I know he didn't have a good game at Hampden. I think that probably ties into the fitness question, Johnny, and what you raised about Raskin as well. You don't want to repeat that. But I think generally he did really well in midfield. I think the reason he's moved higher up is in part because maybe it suits him a little bit better. It'll allow him to take more shots. He took double the number of shots he's averaged in the league on Saturday, and you see the results of that, but also because of Cantwell there. And I think Cantwell can do that job and allow Tillman a bit more freedom. I don't have concerns about Tillman off the ball personally. I think you've got to play him. I think you have to in that front three, because yes, you can say he's not had a great Old Firm game yet. Who has this season? Maybe Sakala in that game, that 2-2 game. Maybe some players in the second half. You know, that Champions League argument I think is quite similar. He was the youngest player in there, who yes had some very bad evenings, but Rangers had the worst group stage ever. I don't think he's the one that should be at fault for that. If you look at Tillman's season, I mean, Tillman's been Rangers' best player this season by a distance to my mind. And I think there's just been a lack of context about the fact that he's 20. This is his first professional season and he's adapting to the unique demands of Scottish football. And obviously, as I think Beale said, has only played 4 of the last 11 games. What stood out to me when he was in that front three, and we were speaking of this yesterday, Johnny, he has so much to his game that sometimes maybe that's a difficulty as a manager to try and put him in any said position, because there's so many things he can do. But it's ball carrying as well, kind of the strength he has to hold off players relatively quick. With that freedom in the front three, I think he can be a really exciting player. You've also got to think you've got 5 subs, and if you're thinking of playing the long game, the game's probably not going to be done on the hour mark.
It may well be, though.
Well, it has been
was the last couple of times there.
Hopefully it won't be done then, should we say, on the hour mark. Certainly not from a Rangers perspective. I don't think Rangers are going to race into a 3-goal lead by the hour. So then you've maybe got to think as well about what you want to bring on from the bench, who you want to have as an option. Do you want to have Sakala if the game's a little bit stretched? Because when did he come alive in that game last year, in that 1-1 game? It was the kind of final half hour when there was space down the side of the defence. And I think that's where he's been so effective away from home for Rangers. We know Kent's going to play because he always is going to play under Beale. I'd be shocked if Kent doesn't play. But are we really going to see him pull up kind of rabbit out the hat and not start a central striker? I don't know. I think Tillman can play that back to goal role. I don't think Morelos has got the better of Carter-Vickers so far, and I don't think he can play Cholak as that kind of sole number 9. So I honestly am quite stumped. I'm not sure what you do about it, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm like with Johnny. I think I would be quite interested to see what he does with that number 9 position. Morelos, of course, people not too enamoured with him at the moment. Of course, it looks like he's departing Ibrox in the summer. Cholak, like you, Joshua, I don't think he's the answer either. Rangers need to sort the striking options out in the summer. I think that is clear for all to see. It's a big game as well for Borna Barisic, and this ties in. He has been giving an interview to a publication back in his homeland. Mitchell says, huge game for Borna, been posted missing a few times. And I wanted to raise some of the points that he was making here. He says in the summer, just talking about his contract to a publication back in his homeland. He says, in the summer, I enter the last year of my contract. I have a top relationship with everyone at Rangers. If I went to another club, I would choose the one that was just like Rangers, but you never know what could happen. The situation could change in a day. And he was talking about the game against Celtic. He says, on Old Firm Day in Scotland, everything stops. The Scots are football fanatics, and Derby Day is a holiday. They live for these games. At the moment, unfortunately, we are second behind Celtic. I would recommend everyone to go to that derby if they have the chance. The atmosphere is special, and every Derby Day is important. It's a big game for him, Johnny. I think it was interesting to see him getting the nod at the weekend. I know you had Ridvan in to play against Dundee United, but Borna got the nod. I think that's with one eye on Parkhead on Saturday. Do you have some reservations about Borna starting that game?
I mean, I'm a Borna fan, but I don't think he's had the best of times at Parkhead in recent years. He was actually pretty good, it must be said, in the last Old Firm game and in the semi-final. I thought he contained Jota quite nicely. It was the other side of the pitch that there were problems. Borna's one of these players that can either be very, very, very good indeed or woeful. And it seems like there's very little in between. He doesn't give you many 6 or 7 out of 10s. Listen, when he's on his game, he's excellent. And he's got a wonderful left foot. I don't think you're going to pitch Ridvan into that game at this stage. He's going to play. No. And there's just really not an argument about
Johnny,
that.
do you not
Ridvan,
think, just to come back on you on that, though, you look at Celtic and they put Alistair Johnson in, I think it was for his Old Firm debut at Ibrox this season. I think they did it with Juranovic last season. So, I mean, I kind of agree with you, but sometimes I wonder, is that the right approach to take? Because surely
this is not based on what you're talking about is based on Ange Postecoglou over the last 18 months. I'm talking about 35 years of watching Rangers and seeing players on their debuts shrink in Old Firm games because they're not quite acclimatized to what that game is, and then being pilloried in the media for the next 6 months and by fans because they didn't stand up to the intensity of that one occasion because they were thrown in too early. So, yeah, Alistair Johnson playing in a very successful team that hasn't lost in how long? Ridvan Yilmaz, in a Rangers side that's lost their last 2 games at Parkhead via a complete shellacking, and who are 9 points behind in the league. It's different. I know what the point you're trying to make. If you're good enough, you just go in. But the reality is that, as I've already said on this pod, you can make your Rangers career as a Rangers player in these games, but you can also destroy it. And the one that immediately comes to mind as overcoming that is Fernando Rickson. 23 minutes he got in his first Old Firm encounter. He was torched by Bobby Pettit. I remember it well. I remember it like it was yesterday. He's the only player that I can think of that had that kind of really difficult performance in an Old Firm game that had the strength of character and the mentality to come back. And not only come back better than before. There's not many players that have done that. And history is full of guys who came in for an Old Firm game and were never seen again. Or certainly never seen in the same light after a bad performance. I give you Exhibit A, Philip Senderos. And that was a player with mega experience.
Yeah, it looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the planet apart from Parkhead that afternoon.
Indeed. Listen, Ridvan's a talented young guy. Josh, comes back to my point about Raskin. I just don't think he's had enough games. I don't think he's had enough momentum. I just don't think it would be the right time to throw him in. And if it went wrong, we all know how it's perceived. It's yet another summer transfer flop on the basis of one game. And that's just not smart. Come back at me, son. Come on.
Well, no, I take your point. I also think, though, that I think Barisic is in a system that suits him better. You could definitely, especially under Gio's system, I think on the ball he struggled to kind of build up. But you're speaking about a team that's been beaten heavily there in the last 2 times in the last year, and you're speaking about a player who's one of the main kind of culprits for that, or certainly been caught out for kind of two or three of the goals. So no, I agree that he's probably not played enough games, and Raskin, you maybe don't want to rush him in. But I also think if you look at that Old Firm game at Hampden a month ago, 2 months ago, I think the predominant feeling was, you've seen this before. You've seen these players get beat before. Yeah. It needs freshness. If it's a question of fitness, maybe not. Ridvan's obviously also come from Turkey, so he's played in I know the Old Firm is unique. He's played in a few kind of feisty derbies in his time. Yeah. I think there's just a time for certain players to play, and there's a time for certain players to succeed them. And I think a lot can be said about the need for freshness in this Rangers squad, which Campbell and Raskin have shown.
I agree with all of that, but just answer me this.
Right.
Say he plays and has a poor game. What follows?
Criticism probably, but if Barisic plays and has a poor game, if
Barisic plays and has a poor game, Ridvan's there to come in, and over time he will get the time to become a Rangers player. I think it's throwing Ridvan in to a game like this, given the lack of games in the lead up, given his injury problems. I don't think it's fair on the lad, because the amount of criticism and the amount of intense scrutiny he will be under on the back of a bad performance will be what defines the next 3 months of conversation around Ridvan Yilmaz. I don't think that's right. But listen, I get it. I get it. I see a lot of the comments that agree with you and giving me a bit of a hard time, and that's fine. It's a passionately held position based on what I've seen in the past, and I know that there's a narrative that people want to put around the summer transfers, and this would help shape that if Ridvan was to have a very poor game after being put into the Lions' Den. And I think this guy is a long-term project, 5-year contract he's got. I don't think he's going to be seen as one to ship out back on loan, despite what the Turkish media would have you believe. This is a guy that Rangers see as their long-term answer, and Beale has made it clear. Again, a question I asked him about Ridvan, that he's really excited to work with him, and he feels like he can offer the team something different. Now, I think it'll be absolutely fascinating if he plays, Josh, and he may well play brilliant if he was put in, and his Rangers career skyrockets from there. I think it's a bit of a gamble, though.
Yeah, lots of comments coming in. I'll get to a few of them. Mark says, look, I'd start Borna, but if he's having his usual Old Firm flapping, then Beale has to make the change quickly. CGM55 says, Borna's strength is his crossing. Absolutely is. Problem is we have nobody in the box to cross to. Ridvan offers something totally different. It would be an interesting selection. It would be, listen, Borna doesn't deserve to be dropped, I don't think either. I think he's been pretty steady, but of course the scar tissue, there was a comment came in, a lot of these players do have scar tissue, and we know that Borna's found it difficult there in the past, just that ball whipped in across the face of goal and just caught in his heels, Johnny. That's, I think, Rangers fans will be worried about that, I think.
Yeah, and rightly so. I'm not standing here saying Borna Barisic is the player that I'd want in the Old Firm game based on his prior performances. To be honest, I just think it's a dangerous one with Ridvan to just throw him in and kind of say, there you are, son, make it or break it, because I think that would be the ultimate outcome. Who'd have thought that this would have been the big talking point from the pod? The thing is, Borna's going to play, because if Ridvan was going to play, he would have played at the weekend.
That was my thinking. I thought he would. I thought he would get the nod as well. But it was interesting. Right, before we go, I just wanted to touch on another thing that broke yesterday. I just want to get your views on it. Graham Mitchell says the club issuing more shares is a concern. Rangers have issued 7.7 million new shares in the club. Paperwork filed on Companies House revealed the update and the pricing for the shares. 25 pence will be paid for each share. It means the club would raise £1.93 million by selling the 7.7 million shares offered. Kieran Maguire, of course, who is a top dog in terms of the football finances, has tweeted yesterday, says it's not clear if this cash or loans being converted to equity, and it comes just 2 months after Rangers last issued shares at 25 pence. What do you make of this, Johnny?
Well, fundamentally, we don't know what this is. This could be, as you've alluded to, one of the guys who's got a loan in, someone like John Bennett, for example, saying, I'll take some of this back as equity. Alternatively, it could be to alleviate a cash flow issue. We know we're getting to April. That season ticket money for next year isn't coming in yet. That season ticket money for last year was an awful long time ago. And if that's the case, that is slightly concerning, I have to be honest, because Rangers should be wiping their face by now with the money that they brought in. If you think about the transfer fees that have come in, you think about the European revenue over the last few years, you certainly would have hoped that Rangers would have been in a position to be self-sustainable. But again, it's until we have more clarity on what it means, it's kind of idle speculation, isn't it? And this is something we'll be looking into in the coming days at the Rangers Review, to try and get in the bottom of it. But you can be I think you can rest assured that one thing, despite the criticism that's out there about the Rangers board, these are guys that have the best interests of the club at heart. They're all fans. They're all going to suffer for being part of this club when things aren't going well. So if they're making a move to put more money in or to convert shares to equity, it'll be from a position of trying to do the best thing. Of that, I'm absolutely certain. We might disagree with individual decisions making, whether or not certain people need to be removed from their jobs or not, whether that be Giovanni Van Bronckhorst or whoever else that still may be at the club. The facts remain that this is a board that I've done an awful lot. So I think they've earned a little bit of trust on that, and as I say, I'm sure it'll come out in the wash in the next couple of days. Yeah, it was an interesting bit of news that emerged yesterday. We'll keep our eyes on it, folks, as Johnny says. Right, I think that'll do us here. A bumper show this morning. Big thanks to Johnny and Joshua for joining me. The build-up well and truly underway ahead of that game on Saturday as Rangers make the short trip across the city to Parkhead. Just a reminder, if you want to take advantage of the Rangers Review website, it's just £2 for 2 months worth of content, just £2.99 per month thereafter. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe to sign up, and you'll find a great interview that Joshua did with Neil Banfield on there this morning. We'll be back again tomorrow, but until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Bye for now.